Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. My guest today is a child expert. He's written several books, including The 5 Simple Truths of Raising Kids, and he also is a researcher who helps artists create work for children. We chat about his research and how Paris has influenced his life in so many ways. Please welcome to the show, Brad Snyder. So welcome to the show, Brad. I am very happy to have you here. You're going to be a new Parisian pretty soon. You're making the big move.
That's right. Very excited about that.
And this has been a dream for quite some time. I mean, how long have you been planning to move here? How long have you wanted to move to Paris?
Two different questions. I've wanted to move to Paris for decades.
Decades, wow.
Yeah. And, really shortly after the first time I was allowed to visit it as a student back in the 90s, it was something that I had dreamt of. And then an opportunity presented for my family to move there back at the end of 2019, with us moving at the beginning of 2020. And then something occurred. I don't know if you saw it in the news. There was a global pandemic that kind of stopped us from making that move. And we finally get to do it now.
Well, I'm glad you're still making it happen. I've had quite a few people I've met here who moved right before the pandemic started, or actually even moved during the first lockdown, which I find very fascinating. Like you're running into the fire,
Yeah.
But everyone's trying to make it work. And I'm glad you're going to be able to bring your family as well and start some sort of life here. But it's been decades of planning. That's a long time.
It is.
And I want to talk a little bit about what you do. So what I understand is you help artists create work for children, and you've worked with Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and even Disney, Harry Potter. So talk about how you got started in this field. How did you even get on this track?
Well, I actually started doing direct service with children. And so my background is in psychology and in policy analysis and program evaluation. So when I first started doing work, it was direct service. So running after school programs, running out of school time programs, and then becoming a school counselor. And then after that, got really deep into the research working for a public policy think tank. And that had me studying kids in schools, but also studying kids in prisons, kids in all sorts of public programs that were trying to help them overcome different deficits or adversity or really thrive. And I was doing great in that and I was enjoying it. But then I started to burn out just a tiny bit. And I went to monster.com of all places, and I kind of typed in my skill set. I knew how to research. And what did I like? Well, I love the arts. I love the media. And there was an ad for a company in Manhattan that studied children in the media. I went to work for them, but then I missed all of the work that I was doing with kids in other situations and kind of had to start my own firm. So instead of looking at children in one domain, we look at children across domains. So we look at children as sons and daughters, as brothers and sisters, as students, as video game players, as comic book readers, as readers, as moviegoers, and in doing that, I've gotten to work, like you said, with people creating cartoons for Cartoon Network, or creating stage shows, or people writing books, creating digital series, and helping them understand who a kid is, what they like and what they don't like, and maybe more importantly, why they like what they like, why they're doing what they're doing.
That's fascinating to me because I always had that question in my mind when watching cartoons that I watched as a child, and you look at it and you're like, why did I like that? Or why was that funny? Or you catch all this adult stuff that you didn't catch as a kid that they kind of sneak into the movies and things like that. And it's just, has this been around forever, what you're doing, or before where the cartoonists just kind of winging it like, oh, maybe a kid will like this, you know? How did they come up with these ideas before?
Some of it has been around for a while, and definitely our approach has been around for a while, in that we absolutely take a much more psychological approach. And so, that trying to understand how children respond to different environments, we're drawing on work that was first kind of posited back in the 1890s, even some of the theories that we're looking and testing. But then a lot of the people, and I have competitors in my field that work alongside me when they're working for Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. And they take much more of a market research approach where they're saying, well, this is what they like. I think when our clients, when they hire me, it's for the why they like what they like. So that is coming out of a deep history of understanding developmental psychology, understanding children as students. And we just apply those theories to how they're interacting with books, how they're interacting with plays, how they're interacting with video games, of course. So it's something that we've kind of pieced together, or I've rather pieced together.
And what are some reoccurring themes? I mean, you're figuring out what they like and why they like it across different domains, but are there common themes of why they like these things?
Well, what I could say to anybody who's listening in the audience who is interested in creating works for kids, being that, a painting or a book or an animated series or a movie, I believe, and I think that I've been able to actually prove this on occasion, that if it's good for them, it'll ultimately be a more successful work of art. And what I mean by good for them is that children, depending on their age, they're trying to get certain developmental needs met in their environment. There are these obstacles or challenges that they're trying to overcome so that they can grow into successful adult humans. And when you're able to make art that helps them with those developmental needs, ultimately the children, I believe, respond much more positively to it. And that becomes a much more successful product.
And so how have children, quote unquote, children changed over the years? Because I feel, and I could be completely wrong, that children are growing up much faster because of the media, the Kardashians, all these things. Yeah. It seems they're like turning into 20-year-olds at 11. Do you find that as well? Or what is the research showing you?
Boy, there's a lot of things going on there. So first of all, I had the privilege of working with this wonderful psychologist named Cliff Nass, and he has this great term for it. And his term was our old brains. And he used that term because in every kind of measurable way, since we started to look at who humans are on the inside, how the brain changes, how it responds, what it's capable of, what it's trying to do, ever since we started analyzing that, the brain really hasn't changed. So humans have these old brains that took a very long time to evolve. And so those brains are growing at a certain rate with certain problems, certain needs, certain developmental milestones that they're meeting. But then the world around that brain changes. So we have our very old brains interacting with a changing world. And that's why it seems sometimes, well, kids are growing up faster or slow or whatever metric you're using. It's because the world around them is very different than the world that was around us, for example, when we were children. But their brains, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and I think this is where we start to sometimes even do harm to our kids. The brains of a 5-year-old is largely the same as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So assuming that they're growing up faster is sometimes being harmful for the kids. And it's that interaction between that old brain and change in society that creates generations that also get talked about a lot. It's where an old brain, all of the old brains in a given society or given country all experience the same change to the environment at the same time. The classic being, World War II in the United States, where all the brains, all those young child brains, all experienced the societal changes that accompanied World War II at the same time and largely in the same way. And it changed how they thought. It changed how what they valued and how they interacted with others around them.
That makes complete sense. It's really interesting. And from your research now, what are you finding that kids are interested in? Like, have cartoons changed a lot? Have kids' books changed a lot?
So to answer your question, I mean, one of the things why kids seem older is also because the people who are raising them are behaving more like children. And there's some really interesting ways around that. So there's been this, it's kind of a rush to the middle. So really starting after World War II, parents, and this is true for all Western countries, moved to a much more participatory style of parenting, where they started asking their kids questions and involving their kids in the adult world.
Yeah.
So we know, for example, that today the typical adult in a Western country, so throughout Europe or in the United States or Canada, North America, will ask their child's advice about which automobile their family should buy. Now, that is not something that happened 20 years ago.
No.
And so our kids seem a little bit older, partially because we're giving them greater responsibility and we're exposing them to more adult things. Maybe you've heard somebody say in your peer group, Crystal, you've heard them say something like, well, we grew up poor, but we didn't know it. I never knew it.
Yeah,
right?
That comes up a lot. That's something I say.
Yeah, exactly. That is not something that kids in the current generation will say. If they are living in poverty, if their parents are having marital problems, if their parents are having dating problems, if their parents are having financial problems, kids today will know because parents share that now, and they didn't used to.
Is that a good or bad thing?
Well, I think it creates difficulties and it creates opportunities. So it's a little bit it's too late to say if it's good or bad because it's already happening. The opportunities it creates is hopefully for some stronger bonds between families, between primary caregivers and their children. But on the downside, it is largely responsible for this tremendous stress that we're seeing described by the current generation of kids. So the current generation of kids are experiencing levels of stress and anxiety far greater than any generation before them, far greater than any generation before them experienced or are currently experiencing. And it's because not only is a 10-year-old worrying about being a 10-year-old, but they're worrying about their parents.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really tough because there could be some oversharing going on there depending on the age.
I think so. I mean, one of the things that I always advocate for is that adults should be adults and adults should be parents, that they shouldn't try to be their child's friend because their child has friends. What they don't have is parents unless you are willing to be that.
And what is the cutoff for a child in your research? What age should we be involving them more, or is there an age?
That's a really good question. And it speaks to this other thing, that something that I also help creators and artists with, is recognizing that a child isn't one thing, that a child goes through many developmental stages between birth through, the end of the teenage years. And that with each of those big changes, those changes are largely dictated by changes in the brain that are then kind of reflected in how that brain interacts with the environment around him or her. And so they each have different abilities as they age across the developmental kind of continuum. So when do you involve them? I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, I think that it really depends on your relationship with the child and how you're communicating with them. So if you know your child and you know that you can let your child know, hey, there's this difficulty that our family's encountering, and you're able to talk to them about it in such a way that the child doesn't think that it's their fault,
Mm-hmm.
or that it's their problem to solve, then you can talk to them about it when they're younger. But
Mm-hmm.
until they're able to make those distinctions, and that's really hard. So if you're dealing with preschoolers, for example, preschoolers have this kind of heightened sense of magical thinking where they believe that they cause things to happen in the environment. So telling them that your family is encountering some sort of difficulty, you are increasing the likelihood that that child will believe that it's their fault or theirs to solve.
Yeah, it seems like it always goes back to that. You hear so many stories of, divorce or the dog died and the kid thinks it was their fault for their
Exactly.
entire life, even into like their 50s,
Exactly.
It's such a sensitive time. And what do you believe is the media's role in child development today? Do you think the media has a certain, rules to follow, or do you think it's just all about money, or do you think the media should, be doing better for child's development depending on what they're producing? What do you believe?
I think they have a huge role, partially because of how much time our kids are spending in what we kind of call the mediated reality. Because you can't even talk about TV now. What is TV, right? What is TV?
Mm-hmm.
And children don't know. So we've had to come up with even a new nomenclature for this because children don't know what a movie is versus a TV show versus a series versus a YouTube channel. They don't think about it that way. To them, this is all video content that has
Yeah.
different lengths and to them serves different needs. So I believe, again, that we do as creators have a responsibility to think about how what we're creating affects the audience.
Yeah.
And I do believe that the best products are those that respectfully look at where the audience is and helps that audience grow. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
there's wonderful examples of this happening, and ultimately they become the more successful programs rather than one that's just trying to quickly grab eyeballs or manipulate.
And how do you feel about social media? Do you think it's an evil? Is it a good? I mean, it's allowing more creatives to get their work found, but how do you feel about it?
Well, the science of it is a little bit murky. So we know, for example, that people who, for example, suffer depression spend a lot of time on social media. But what we don't know is which way the causal arrow is going. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of sensational stories out there that say, oh, okay, what's happening is that the social media is causing the depression. Well, we don't actually know that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of very good data to suggest that people who are feeling separated, who are feeling isolated, use social media to reach out to other people. So it's not that the social media made them depressed. It was the depression drove them into social media in hopes of finding meaning or connection, something else. So we don't know a lot, other than there is a tremendous risk for, well, the data that we do have about how screen time kind of writ large hurts kids is about when it replaces other activities.
Mm-hmm.
So the straight data on 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, what is too much, what is too little, none of that science is good. What the science that is strong is around when a screen replaces other activities. And that's what we don't want. So we don't want somebody to be avoiding in-person relationships because of their time on the screen. We don't want a child to not be outside playing because of time that they have at the screen. But we also, as adults, we have a tremendous responsibility there too, because we're the ones that put the screen in front of them. And
Mm-hmm.
we're also the ones that got a little bit scared of having our kids outside playing, despite the
Yeah.
fact that there wasn't really good numbers or statistics to suggest that we should be afraid of them being outside playing.
Yeah. Where do we think that comes from? Why did people freak out about putting their kids outside? Too many Netflix serial killer shows? Or...
Yeah, no, quite literally. I mean, it was, the stories got sensationalized. And despite the fact that, you know, child abductions are incredibly rare. They're almost like unquantifiably small, but we're all
Wow.
afraid of them because
Yeah.
they of how, prevalent they are when they do happen, how much media they get. And so we said, okay, well, you can't go outside and play. But then we also said, but I don't want you sitting in front of that screen. Well,
Yeah.
what do we leave them with? If they can't be with
Mm.
their friends, if they can't be, so as adults, we bear a lot of responsibility for the current state.
And have you studied like what's going on in France compared to America? Are you finding the same things or is it completely different with what's happening with kids?
I'm hoping to learn more. I get to interact with some colleagues from France at the World Anti-Bullying Forum, which I typically
Mhm.
participate in. So I have sat through some of those, some of their presentations and looked at some of that data. We know, for example, that bullying and cyberbullying is pretty universal. If
Yeah.
if we have people, anytime people get together, anytime kids get together, there is an opportunity for bullying. We know a little bit. There are some universal truths about who gets bullied and why, and those apply equally in France as in the United States. But I am interested in learning a little bit more about the media habits of kids in France.
And who does get bullied more and why?
Well, we have this, the kids that get bullied are rarely bullied for anything that they actively did. They're typically bullied because they don't have strong connections with their peers or with adults. So
Mm.
they get bullied because they can be bullied.
Hmm.
So if you don't have strong peer connections, so if you don't have a strong peer group that's looking out for you, if you don't
Yeah.
have strong relationships with adults who are looking out for you, you're a great target for a bully. And it's the bully who's making these decisions. The victim has never done anything to warrant the behavior. It's that the bully needs a victim. And so people with these weak social connections are great, present great victims.
And is there a strong connection between what's going on in media and teen suicide? Because I've read that suicide rates are through the roof right now in young people, like teens to 30-year-olds. And have you found any correlation in the data from that with what's going on in media?
So once again, it's a little bit more complicated. We did
Yeah.
see a spike in teen suicide that was actually preceding the pandemic, and we are getting reports. Well, initially we had reports about suicides during the pandemic, and that seems to actually might not be entirely true. And I'm looking at that data here in the United States. But one of the reasons why this giant spike in, or what we thought was a big spike in teenage suicide seemed so worrisome, and it is, but it's because we had been on about a 40-year decline in teen suicide rates, where
Wow.
teen suicides have really kind of hit their peak in kind of like late 70s, some violence hitting a peak in the 90s, and then had been declining. And they'd gotten really, really low. So small increases in actual numbers looked huge, looked like huge increases in rates. And so we started to look at it, and we should, because obviously we don't want anybody to commit suicide. But in looking at the rate of suicides among teens, the thing that we didn't look at was the rate of suicides among their parents.
Hmm.
And the rate of suicides among their parents experienced a far greater increase, and the rate of suicide among the parents of people in the parents' age is actually far greater. The rate of suicide is far higher than the rate of suicide among teens. So when we
Hmm.
think about teen suicide, we have to think about it I believe, in the larger context of why are so many people committing suicides, not just teens?
Yeah.
And really, are we going to be able to stop kids from committing suicide if people in their parents' cohort are continuing to?
Yeah, it is interesting. Tell us the research, Brad. Find more information.
Well, again, like sometimes the frustrating part about doing the research is that we can find the problems and don't always know the solution. But
Hmm.
I think it goes back and honestly to part of the purpose of this podcast, Crystal, which is I think a lot of people are looking for connection, and I think they're looking for meaning. And without those kind of connections, without meaning, life can seem fairly bleak. And
Yeah.
we've lost. So, in order for us to have relationships, we have to have shared experiences. We have to have common interests, common language, so that we can communicate with each other. And arts can be a tremendous source for these shared experiences. Plays, movies, paintings, books can be these tremendous sources of shared experiences that we can form relationships around and really build these protective factors and resilience that will help prevent us from, looking to suicide when we encounter adversity.
It's so true. And that was a major part of starting this podcast, is wanting people to find something to be passionate about, to find that they're not alone in feeling, not good enough to start something. And there's a lot of common themes. And I mean, we all just want to have a purpose, right? Whether that's something creative or not. It's all.
I'm thinking about several of your more recent guests that, they were artists and they connected with either bandmates or other artists to form collectives, or even with the others to form schools and put on productions through the art. So they were able to find those communities and develop those human connections that we absolutely need.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not meant to be solo, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
And how do you define creativity?
Well, I think creativity, in my opinion, is when you're able to take an idea, an example, a thought from outside of one environment and bring it into that environment. So I think that if you look at a job, or if you look at even the entertainment world, it can become very linear, where everybody's working together, and so they're progressing slowly because they're all learning from each other. But they were learning what was done before, and then they're teaching what was done before, and it becomes this kind of very slow path.
Mm-hmm.
And creativity is when you step outside that field and bring something from without and bring it to that field, a new idea, something that they never even thought of as being part of that field before. And you can look to, countless painters that did that left the academy after learning how the academy taught painting. And we only recognize them now because they stopped painting the way that the academy taught them to paint.
Yeah, yeah. It's connecting the dots, taking something and making it your own, but it's still connected somehow.
Agreed.
And you've written several books, you do all this research, you help other creatives, make connections. So tell me, how do you get focused? How do you get into these flow states for writing or researching? What is your process?
Well, I absolutely use the arts a bunch of ways. One, it's something that I use to inspire my work. So at the end of my day, even if I had spent that day, looking at animation or something like that, at the end of my day, I'm listening to music and I'm looking at art. And I've found a way to kind of tie it back into what I do, but I find that it's very inspiring. I heard that the actor Wendell Pierce, he had this great line. He said, art is to society what thoughts are to an individual. And so I can use arts. I can look at the music that's being created or the paintings that are being made or even what's being written. And it gives me insight into the people that I'm studying in ways that just talking to them might not.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that quote. It's fascinating. And do you have advice for other people searching for their creative talents? Maybe they think they're not good at anything. What would you say to those people?
Well, I know that this is a little bit controversial because, I do think that, and I know that it puts me at odds with others in the art community, but I absolutely ask people to think about the audience. I do think that we need to pay attention. I think that creating art as a solo activity, that you're creating it just for you, I think that can be very therapeutic to the individual. But if you're looking to be a professional, then I think that you need to think about, well, how is my art being received?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not advocating for pandering. What I'm advocating for is an understanding that I believe that most artists that I've known or met, they had goals. You know,
Yeah.
they wanted somebody else. They wanted their audience to feel a certain thing, to believe a certain thing after experiencing their art. And I believe one path to have that kind of success where your work affects the change that you want is to spend some time thinking about who is going to be looking at it, listening to it, seeing it.
Yeah, especially if you want to get paid to do it. I know many artists struggle with that. They say, I'm making what I want to make, people take it or leave it.
Yeah.
But then, there is a money exchange involved sometimes. So, like you said, it's different if you're making it for yourself or for other people as a business. And I think a lot of creatives struggle with that business side.
Well, I look at somebody who, and I don't know if she's familiar to your audience or not, but the Rebecca Sugar created this Cartoon Network program called Steven Universe. And if members of your audience haven't heard of it, that's okay. But it was huge in the United States, but huge in particular among kids that thought that nobody else got them. It was enormous among LGBT kids. Rebecca Sugar is like a rock star in their world. I had never in my life, and working in animation and for a long time, I had never had encountered so many 11-year-olds who knew the name of the person who made their favorite cartoon.
Yeah, that's shocking.
And she did it. And she did it. She's no less of an artist for the fact that she deliberately set out to try to figure out how to use her medium and her creativity to affect the biggest change possible. She thought deliberately and sought out experts to help her figure out, am I saying this the right way? Here's what I want the kids to believe. And in working with her, what I can tell you is I never told her what to do. I explained behaviors that she was aware of, that she saw, and she was able to translate that through her own experience into art. So it didn't change what she was doing. It didn't affect the vision. It gave her more with which to work.
I like that. That's a better way of thinking of it. You don't have to think about, you just have to think about combining the research, combining the ideas that could be the most effective.
Well, in my interactions with her, I think it was always her going, oh, that's why that happened to me, or that's why that happened to my friends, or I see that. Oh, I see that happening. Thank you. I was always curious about, or I saw those as two separate things. I didn't know that they were connected. That is so useful to me.
Yeah. And she took that and ran with it.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to watch the cartoon. And why do you think creatives are attracted to Paris?
Well, I think of Paris. So first of all, Paris has all these amazing museums, right? They have all of them, but then it's like all these little museums that are inside one big museum that is the city. So when you are walking through Paris, you are encountering art and beauty, even if you're on your way to see a different piece of artwork. If you're awake, if you're observant, you are experiencing sights and sounds and smells of beauty, of human artistry around every corner. And I know that so many of your guests have said the same thing, but I think that's a piece of it.
You're walking around a museum already before you even get to the museum.
Yes.
And where can people connect with you online and follow your research, your work, greet you in Paris?
Well, I'm absolutely excited about, if anything that I've said is interesting to anybody in your audience, so I'm happy to give lectures or to collaborate. This is a big focus of what I'm looking to do in the near future. My firm's website is www.newamsterdamconsulting.com. And then my personal website is www.rbradleysnyder.com. And I'm R. Bradley Snyder also on Instagram and on Twitter, but I'm rarely on Instagram or Twitter.
Too busy doing research. Well, we'll put that in the show notes so people can connect with you. And I'm excited to greet you in Paris. I hope you arrive soon.
Thank you.
Get over here with Fam Jam. Get your research going.
That's right. Thank you, Crystal.
Thanks so much, Brett.
Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.